Alright, so the Blazer needs a couple more things done until I'm happy with where it's at. One of the things that I want to do is the exhaust. The stock muffler, gutted a little bit, and then a couple turn downs. What I want to do is, I got a thrush turbo muffler that I want to put on there, and then I just ordered a replacement tailpipe, just because there's a potential that people could sit in this thing when it's running, and I don't really want to worry about the smell of exhaust in the cabin. So we're just going to go ahead and put new muffler on, and then the tailpipe to dump it out the rear corner. So we're going to start by cutting off this flange here. Gotta cut this flange off here, and then I have an extension, a piece that we're gonna put in here to make sure that we're all the same length. So from the front of that hanger to the face of the flange, the mounting surface is 25 3/4 inch. So we'll just mirror the same thing over here. So let's get started. All right, so we have here is a 2.5 inch opening, and we're going to step down to 2 1/4. And then as you go out the back, the stock replacement tailpipe is 2 1/4 outside. So what we did here is I made some relief cuts in here, so that we can just take, and we're just going to hammer it in and essentially just neck it down, so it fits tight over this, so we have less to fill in because this stuff's really thin. So just so I want a tighter fit, and I can file down these old welds a little bit. But let's go ahead and do that now. If you try and do this without making these relief cuts, as you see, they're still the same width at the bottom, but they'll get closer at the top because you need to make the space. Otherwise, what you'll end up doing is you'll try and work it all in, and then you'll have this will be close right here, and then you have a wrinkle that comes out because that extra tubing has to go someplace. That's why when you look at like a mandrel bent tube, these wrinkles, you're essentially going to get the same thing, unless you were to in this case make the relief cuts so that the extra tubing has been taken away, and that's why you'll see the gap will close up as we just tap these in. We only have to go 1/4 of an inch the whole way around, which would be 1/8 on each side. So we don't want to get too crazy with this, or we'll be opening it back up. Oh yeah, look at that. We're getting there. I'd say we need a little bit more. And you see there how they're, like I said, they were closing up, and these bottom ones are still, that's the width of the blade that we cut it with. All these tops are closing up as we bend them in. Oh yeah, that's it right there. Get a little love. Look at that. Like a glove. Just straighten her up. Gonna have to go out there and throw it underneath at least to eyeball the rotation of this, because I didn't pay attention to that when I took it off. What we might actually end up doing is putting it back on the vehicle and then just tack it underneath, and that'll help me with getting it level and rotationally correct. Alright, let's do it. So it gave us some room to slip over, because we have, this is a 2 1/4 inch inside diameter, and those are 2 1/4 inch outside diameter. So they neck it up so that it can slip over. So we're gonna take advantage of that. That'll just help us with our tack welds. It'll help give us some leverage to keep it in place so we're not breaking tack welds. The stress is more on the pipe than it is on the tack welds, where if we were just gonna do a butt joint, it's kind of an overlapping joint. So we're going with 8 1/8 of an inch, and what I like to do with round tube, I could get the chop saw down, but it's just another tool to get out and have to put away. So we're just going to use the angle cutter, but we're going to mark 8 1/8 of an inch. We're just going to mark it around a couple spots on the pipe, and that'll just help us keep a nice square cut. So this will be slipping into another pipe, so we're just going to... This will be slipping inside of another pipe, so we're just going to clean up this edge right here. Give it a little taper. All right, now it goes in there. Looks like we got a front hanger up here that keeps this thing lifted off the frame. And the bolts came out, so let's fix that before we go any farther, because this needs to be off of this cross member. Otherwise you're going to have a lot of noise inside. Noise likes to travel through metal. That's why we put bushings on everything, because bushings absorb vibration. So right now, with this the way it is, there's probably a lot more cab noise in this S10 Blazer than there's going to be when we're done. Especially when you hit bumps and you hear this the whole time. Doesn't sound nice driving down the road, watching a vehicle, and hearing it bounce down the road making noise like that. Just not very nice. So let's fix that first, and then worry about getting this in place. Oh, nice first try. Alright, we're gonna have to go cut these bolts down because they're obviously way too long. Or we'll dig through the bolt bin real quick and see if we have anything shorter in the same size. They just got better. Tires for another project. Oh, these are nice. It is a really tight squeeze up there. So we got us a 1/2-inch ratchet wrench. We're gonna put some thread locker on these to make sure they don't go anywhere. Again. Dust right in the face. Here we are, off the frame, sitting right here, and on the other cross member. All right, let's get back to fitting this thing up. Got clearance on the top, clearance against the frame, clearance on the drive shaft. I think it's time to get the welder out and start putting some tacks in. We want at least 3 if we can get them on the sides and then on the bottom. And then what we'll do is we'll pull the hangers, pull those bolts on that flange, and then hopefully it lets us drop it down enough that we can get the wire feed gun on top of these pipes, and we'll close it up. So what I have in the welder right now is 0.035 diameter wire, and it's flux core. I have gas. It's just one of the big 10-pound spools, and I'd really prefer not to take it out. So we're gonna try that first, and then worst case, we'll get the .030 and get the gas flowing and do some MIG welding. But let's try the flex core first. I'll tell you, it's so windy out here today, we might have no option but to do the flex core. And MIG would not like all this wind. Make sure we're nice and level. We are. I've got a couple burn throughs, but we'll be able to touch those up a little bit. I'm just gonna have to move a little faster. Turn our wire speed down a little bit and try that. And I forgot a wire brush. Let's get a wire brush. It just got windy. This is not fun. It ain't gonna be too pretty, but it's gonna be solid. Alright, so we got the exhaust all installed, welded up. Threw some primer on the welds. I may have got a little crazy with the primer, but welds aren't beautiful. They're not bad though for what they are. Got that all welded up, nice and sealed. Back here's a little bit more of a pretty weld. Threw some primer on it, and then same back here, painted over the sticker. Got her all welded up. Alright, so it's looking pretty good. Let's fire it up and see what she sounds like. Hopefully my back's not all dirty. Got to do a belt and a tensioner next, but it sounds nice and quiet with just a little bit of throat. It's only a 4.3. Obligatory, I have a new exhaust rev video. I got a little wet there. One of the last couple things we have to do on this Blazer is the tensioner assembly and the belt. If you look here, I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but that pulley on the tensioner here is pretty chewed up, and they're real easy to change. That's obviously tightening it. Looks like the tensioner is a little worn out too, and that's one of the reasons I just wanted to throw a whole new tensioner on. It's really, it was like 30 bucks for the tensioner. Yeah, look at that. It's not really wanting to keep the tension. Look how much play this is going to have. I'm not really even putting that much force on it. But anyway, it's like 30 with the whole assembly, or 20 for the pulley. So I just want the whole assembly. And then because it's all chewed up in there, I'll show you better when we get it out. But because it's all chewed up, it's probably chewed into the belt pretty good. And same thing, belt's like 30 bucks locally, like half that much online, but then they get you with the shipping, so you got to figure out where you want to spend your money, I guess. But let's get this thing off here. It's a pretty quick job. Fingers crossed. Now it's going to take me all day. So yeah, take the tension off. In this case, you use a 3/8 inch ratchet. Sorry, 3/8 inch ratchet. I think, yeah, the one on my Dodge Cummins uses a 1/2 inch ratchet. They keep it pretty easy. And if you forget the belt routing, it's usually up here on the sticker, or sometimes up here on a sticker. Let's see what we have here. Yeah, the belt's really not too bad, a little dry. But as for cracking, there's really not. It's an older belt, you can tell, but there's really not any cracking. Very little. But I don't want to find out on the side of the road that the belt should have been replaced. And so we're doing it today. So if you've never seen one of these before, you have your bolt that goes into the engine block, and this is your locator pin to keep it from rotating. It's kind of an anchor point. And there's a coil spring in here, and it, like I said earlier, I showed you, it keeps tension on the belt. It's an automatic tensioner, where the older, like the engine I have in my Jeep Wrangler is a Dodge 318. I have an old Ram Charger, but it requires manual tensioning, where you would loosen up a bolt on the alternator, and you would loosen the bolt and you have to pull against it, so you're putting pressure against the belt to create the tension, and then you would tighten that bolt or nut back down, and then it's just that tension. And as your belt gets older or stretches a little bit, you're gonna have to come back. You hear it squeaking a little bit or squealing. You'll have to come back and retighten it. Where these are spring loaded, so they keep a constant tension. But if you look at this pulley here, I don't know if it's because it was just so old, but I've really never seen that before. It's pretty chewed up. It looks like it's fairly brittle. We'll whack it with a hammer and see what happens. It's a Gates part, so it's a pretty good one. I don't know, I was looking for a date code. Yep. If that is the date code. I don't know if Chevy put Gates parts on, but I don't know. We'll see. Yep, so here we are with the new one. New bolt. Where did I put that old one? Here we go. Both Gates brand. Made in Canada. There are worse places to have it manufactured. These are pretty universal. This model number probably covers, I know it covers probably most of these 4.3s, a lot of the 5.7 Chevys, and it probably even crosses into other makes and models. said made in Canada, but then there's a stamp on the side here that says assembled in Mexico. Right there, I don't know if you can see that. Still, worst places to be made. A slight girth, half a girth. Alright, the last two things we're working on for this Blazer is vacuuming and charging the air conditioning, and then the driver's side door pin. One of the bushings is pretty much gone, so we're going to replace that. We just vacuumed the system for about 30 minutes on the high and the low, and we just locked the valve down on the vacuum side, and we're just going to let our gauges sit there and make sure that it'll hold the vacuum and there aren't any leaks. Otherwise, we'll just be wasting Freon. If we try to put Freon in there with a leak, it's just going to leak right back out and we'll be in the same boat. So we're just going to sit here for 20-30 minutes, make sure the vacuum remains about the same, and meanwhile we'll put this door pin in. We started by prying the spring out of there. That's what holds the door open. It rides on this little idler wheel here, and this bracket has a couple of round grooves cut into it to hold your door open against the spring pressure. Took a punch, knocked the door pin out the bottom, and these bushings are in really bad shape, so that's what we're after right here. Let's see. Yeah, it just fell apart on us. You see that groove cut into the pin too. Bushing in, and the top one is in place, so we're just going to give it a little help with the hammer and this extension. We're all set. Let's drop that pin. Well, bring the pin up from the bottom, opposite the way we pulled it out. Old bushing. Now the fun part.